Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the previous talks as well, and the suggestion of my approach is also very much grounded in the concept of theory and investigating and informing research. So this is a wonderful concept to start with, seeing how praxis works in the context of theory. And to begin with, I just wanted to very briefly introduce the academic standing of where I come from, because I believe it contextualizes the approach very much. So I'm currently based in Saudi Arabia. Effat University is one of the first private non-profit institutions in the country, which was founded under the legacy of Queen Effat, Al Al Saud, so the late wife of King Faisal. And since 1999, they started offering programs. And currently, as you can see, there are 4 colleges and 12 departments. So it's a very small university. It used to be female only up until the academic year of 2021-2022. And recently, we started accepting male applicants. But the ratio from the last year is about 30 versus 70%, so a lot less males than females out of about 1,000 undergraduates. So I wanted to start with this because coming from a Western background and entering this kind of academic background, a lot of ways and approach had to be changed and had to be understood as well to also fit the context of the culture and the institution itself. And the department that I come from is the first and only so far undergraduate degree in cinematic arts. So a film degree, animation degree, as you may call it. And again, it's a very small department. About 90 students are currently enrolled. Again, the ratio between males and females is very different. There are 2 tracks offered, and the starting point was that with those 2 tracks offered, and with about 3 credits per course, with 18 semester overall, so it's about 5 or 6 courses that a student has to take each semester. There is a very inconsistent ratio between theory-based courses and practice-based courses, which of course is understandable in a film degree. And I was also very happy to see a presentation of the first presenter in this conference, who comes from theater background. With this ratio of very few theory courses, there had to be a major shift in teaching delivery and in teaching strategies, which led me to think about how can I actually captivate students' attention in such courses as history or analysis or criticism, which is 100% rooted in theoretical assessments, in lectures. So compared to other courses in which even the final exams are in a form of a project or a video exercise, a filming exercise, how do you actually keep the students engaged and interested in the subject that may seem to be a lot more boring than the others? How can I encourage students to think creatively through assignments and through the coursework that we do together? So something that would fall out of scope of traditional writing, reading approach. How would I allow students to express their understanding in a personal way, which again is very much grounded in the cultural context? So there is a very stark difference between how males and females approach different things. There is a lot of censorship. There are quite a lot of limitations in the things that we can do together. So it's really important at that point in such environment to understand how you can address those students' needs in a very individual and personal grounded way. How could I also promote proficiency with multimedia tools? Because once again, in such environment, there is still considerable lack of the advanced usage of different kinds of digital tools that are available. And of course, this is something that we teach them during the 4 years of studies, because they would go into film or animation. So of course, the whole education is based on using the tools. But what about the other ones? What about knowing how to use presentations? What about knowing how to speak while you're doing it in an online format? What about creating presentations? How to sharpen critical thinking in a new and unconventional way? And of course, from the perspective of a teacher, I needed to understand how I can diversify this existing conventional learning, but also my teaching delivery methods. So what led me to suggesting this videographic criticism approach, it's a technique that's, of course, very much related to film studies. This is where it originated from, and this is something that simply translates as the creation of video essays or visual essays. More formally, it's introduced by Christian Keithley, who was one of the pioneers. So we're talking about 2013 when this was introduced first, who suggests it's a short critical essay on a given film or filmmaker that's typically presented in voiceover by the author and supplemented with carefully chosen and organized film clips. Now, of course, this is very much found in the film studies and in the media studies, but what I'll suggest next is that this can be, of course, taking onto a completely new level and introduced in completely unrelated subjects. So in a nutshell, videographic criticism simply uses visual and or audio elements, so simply sound, to convey ideas, insights, and arguments, or investigation as well. There are many different types. I do have one slide that presents different examples of those, just to save time playing them on screen. So I've narrowed down the approach into 8 different types. Just to very briefly go into them. Of course, there is, so the Pechakucha is something that originates from the flash presentation format, which was originally introduced in 2003 by 2 Japanese architectures. So it's a very quick presentation in which 20 slides each take 20 seconds, and basically this is a very strict parametered format for the oral talk, and a similar approach is used on screen. So how can you fit 6 seconds of a given video material into a video that's composed out of 10 different clips? Now, just to introduce the flow of thought, let's say that an assignment that you would like to propose is in the field of marketing or business. So you want your students to investigate, let's say, a certain type of advertisement that has been made, let's say, by car manufacturers. So if you follow such an approach, they would be finding different videos on YouTube or online or TikTok or Instagram, and simply grouping them in some sort of a general pattern or idea. Let's say it's videos that were created by Mercedes-Benz, and they would present 10 of them in 6 seconds. Poetic approach is a more metaphorical, a more playful, experimental way. So it may be a combination of images and music edited together in a way that that follows a director's thought, sort of. So the personal opinion of a student. That's just a playful way of working with images and sound. A supercut is something that students would be typically most used to because of the emerging era of MTV, which of course they've grown out from, but currently it's Instagram and TikTok, so they're very much used to this quick speed of flashing images and scrolling through things. So supercut is just a very short compilation of clips that usually focuses on common theme or phrase or visual element. Again, going back to Mercedes' concept, what if you ask them to research every single time a Mercedes logo would appear on screen, and they would just make a shortcut compiled out of those? Explanatory video is something that I'm doing right now, something that you've seen a colleague who shared her video recording with us because she couldn't be here as well. So this could also be implemented in a type of presentation. So a student would just prepare some slides, they would screen record their computer, and they would be talking as they switch from slide to another. A desktop documentary is something that's emerging in the field as well. So a very interesting approach that suggests students can record their screen, they can show us the process of the research, they can open a Microsoft Word document and do some typing, they can read things online, they can open different websites, they can open Google search, and we would be following everything that happens on screen. A video collage is an arrangement on screen of different pictures. So imagine you would see 3 different videos or 3 pictures put together on screen side by side. So it's just some sort of a very dynamic display that's similar to a picture collage, but that would offer a moving image. Experimental approach would be students experimenting with different things. There might be some sort of, if we turn into sciences, there might be an equation that they would be trying to solve, and they would simply record again their screen or maybe themselves with their phone trying to solve things in real time that would they then put in a video format. And then finally, as I said, the video presentation is just screen capture of slides that's accompanied by voiceover. And now with the emergence of AI, this can also be done fully in a digital way. Different tools, of course, can be used for that. So in the end, I do acknowledge the challenge of turning to this approach because there might be some technical limitations. There might be students who are still not fully familiar with how to edit different videos. But again, there is, like I've just presented, there is a vast choice of different formats that can be followed depending on the tasks and also depending on the students' individual interests and capability. But just as a starting point, a PC or laptop or cell phone or tablet are completely fine. Those video editing softwares, they're a lot more available and accessible than they used to be before. Most often, they even offer either free subscriptions or maybe free trials. Adobe Premiere Pro, something that's used quite often in the media industry at the moment as well. So it's slightly more advanced, but of course, in the field of film studies, this is what students typically work with. But even this program offers student subscriptions for a much lower price. Screen recording softwares that can be, again, purchased, or if you talk about Mac users, it can be very simply done with QuickTime, which we use to play videos, but it has an option to screen capture, and it records your voice simultaneously without the need of extra microphone. And of course, you can use your phones for sound recording. In terms of the graphic tools, I really liked one of the presenters also turned to Canva because I find it expands into a completely kind of like unrelated use than what it was initially intended to. Now with the introduction of presentations, they have different animation parameters and opportunities. It became an excellent tool that can allow you to do many different things apart from just making presentations or visuals. And stock footage, the accessibility of videos and pictures available online is vast. Of course, I will address the issue of copyright later on, but YouTube has plenty of royalty-free videos, as well as Pixels and Pixabay. So there are people who are happy to film stuff and share with them for free, just subject to giving a proper attribute to them. So an issue with the stock footage doesn't persist anymore. So those are the links that I will share later on in chat. Just a representative video that kind of like demonstrates the approach, the variety of approaches used, and not all of them are grounded in film or media studies. I tried to diversify those. But as you can also see on screen, there are two very prominent practitioners in the field, Kevin B. Lee and Ian Garwood, who have revolutionized the field of videographic approach. Ian Garwood has also got very interesting video essays that actually talk about the benefit of videographic criticism as a teaching approach and how students respond to this. So if you're interested, he does offer some very good insights. And of course, the video journals. So when I turn into the objectives, so one of them here mentions facilitate research. Currently, because the field of videographic criticism still remains little research to an extent, there's a lot of opportunity of co-publishing together with students in videographic journals that really do like and accept those kinds of publications together in a format of a video with a very short accompanying statement. And of course, apart from all the beautiful opportunities that those video essays suggest, they enhance communication skills. Some students find it difficult to write, or they find it difficult to present in front of others. So it helps them with reducing the presentation anxiety. It helps to prepare things beforehand, so they can really work on their presentation, or they can work on the structure of the essay. And sometimes the piece of work by itself does the job, so it saves you the need to talk or explain what has been done. Of course, it's an excellent approach to foster creativity and innovation in class and in teaching strategies. It helps students develop the technical proficiency. So it teaches them how to speak in an engaging way. It teaches them how to really think in a more critical approach, because presenting things on screen also is a parametered approach. It's timed. There cannot be lots of pauses, so it has to be engaging. It can be inclusive. So like I said, not all students there might be uncomfortable presenting in front of others, like in case with males and females mixed in the same class. And it also, of course, promotes reflective learning, because students can really learn from the process of deconstructing work or the subject of interest and then creating a completely new piece of work out of it. And of course, supporting absent students. That's an important one, because sometimes there are pitch presentations, there may be discussions, and the students are not able to attend. So of course, you can always play their presentation on screen in their absence, and then you can also grade it later on. There are different formats. So the ones I've got on screen, you can see there is an example of some sort of explanation of chemistry, and there are some inclusions of different texts. So literature can be discussed in those. There can be some screen recording of some demonstrating how certain software or application works, both presented by teacher as a support for students, or maybe produced by students in response to what they've learned. Of course, the typical presentations, creation of models. So a lot of different application, of course, based on the subject. Pitch decks can be presented as videographic essay, project presentation, criticism of various pieces of work, pieces of art, exploration of historical events, critiques, scientific concepts. So you see there's a vast application of those. I'm sure if you all contributed, we would have come up with a very long list of where it can actually be used and which subjects. And what I tried already with my students, like I've mentioned, I've asked them to record their pitch decks, so project presentations that had to be fit into 2 minutes each, which really allowed me to stay on track with time, not be late, which allowed students to really prepare their presentations well. They allowed me to review their work in advance. They made sure that they can really use their voiceover to speak timely, and to speak without being stressed, without making unnecessary pauses. And there's also a variety of other work, as you can see on screen. So video colleges, Pechakucha videos, which have really sparked a lot of interest from students, because they wouldn't expect that in such course they can make something rooted in practice. Screen capture tutorials, which is a great way for peers to share their observations and their approach with others. Sometimes the way that we explain work is not as efficient as students explain to each other. So I found this exercise to be very successful, and also an explainer video for marketing. So a huge range of applications of what can be done in different subjects. Plenty of advantages. Creative expression, of course, as I said, multimodal communication, because lots of different types of media can be used. Real-world skills, which will help students learn how to present in front of others. Critical analysis, peer learning, which can allow us to play those videos in class and discuss the findings. Reflective practice, which can allow students to look back at their work and see how they've improved. Inclusive assessment, innovative pedagogy. It really allows us to implement some other practices with different learning outcomes. So just diversify the approach. The potential for remote feedback, because we can archive the received work, and we can again show it to the next batch of students. And as I mentioned, the publishing opportunities as well, because it's becoming more and more popular in the academic field. And finally, the challenges. Of course, this is something that hasn't been widely implemented yet. It's a bit easier for me to talk about those challenges again from the perspective of the department that I work in, because the way we approach video recordings would be completely different than departments who don't deal with such things. So of course, it's the technical challenges, the voiceover issues, understanding of guidelines, because again, it's a creative approach which is difficult to standardize in terms of the criteria and grading. It's quite assessment biased sometimes as well. It's very time intensive because you're dealing with a completely different media. So you're writing technically with a digital tool. And the pedagogical integration is also something that has to be researched and understood just to see how that fits in the wider curriculum or the approach. And I think that's it. I think I've taken just a bit longer than what it's supposed to, but just to remind you again that it's an emerging mode of scholarship. It's still yet to be recognized by the academia. Because as the film community, we're trying to push it as a standalone practice. But I just thought that in the context of teaching, it's a very interesting approach that can be tested, that can be tried and really enjoyed by students. Thank you so much.